Hey gang, it's JC and this is the Daily Dose for Monday, June 11th, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Clayton. We have great television archives up top and JC's eye candy below. We'll get to that in just a minute. Now we have the results of the Rock and Roll poll question. We've had some technical difficulties here the last couple of weeks. We try to update the dose every Monday and Friday. That hasn't been happening with regularity here the last couple of weeks, but we think we've got it now. So Mondays and Fridays, new editions of the Daily Dose for now, until whatever happens next happens. So anyhow, going all the way back to that issue about the mayor of New York wanting to propose a ban on sodas that are just these giant tumblers, like 64 ounces of stuff. And 71% of you, overwhelming response, said perhaps it's well-intentioned, but a lot of people are going to dismiss this idea as just more government intervention in areas where it shouldn't be involved, 71%. Number two answer, I don't need 48 ounces of any fluid. That was 11%. 11% thought it was a great idea, because the obesity rates in this country are out of control, and the soda certainly is contributing to that. And only 7% said Mayor Bloomberg is so small that those big drinks probably just look that much larger to him. But an overwhelming majority of you, 71%, say this is another example of the government getting involved in places where they shouldn't be involved. All right. Let's move on to this week's Rock and Roll poll question. I gotta say this, I don't know, sometimes people get mad when you say stuff like this, but that's sort of been my job here for the last 28 years, is to say things that I think need to be said, even if they're not necessarily popular. And it has to do with Paul McCartney. Let's be honest, if you've been paying attention, the last half dozen or so live performances by Paul McCartney have been putrid. And that's not to knock Paul McCartney. The man is like 70 years old, and he's been hitting it out of the park for the last 40 years, and that's great. But there just reaches a point where everybody needs to maybe hang it up, or maybe alter the act a little bit, or pull back, or whatever. You know, see Paul McCartney out there at 70 trying to do I Saw Her Standing There. I'm not sure that that's working anymore. And he just did a performance a couple of days ago. It might have been for the Queen or something. And you're sitting there watching it going, this sounds awful. And it's Paul McCartney, so you don't want to jump all over him. Anyhow, here's our question. The last half dozen or so live performances by Paul McCartney have been less than stellar. Is it time for Paul to hang it up? Number one, answer A. Hell no, a Beatle is still a Beatle, and even if his voice is shot, it's still exciting to hear him. Number two choice. Maybe he should perform a much more limited repertoire that requires a lot less in terms of vocal and physical demands. Number three possibility for an answer, he should have hung it up years ago. Or D, Paul is dead. Please answer in the corner. We'll have results for you on Friday's edition of the Daily Dose. Not a lot of stories I do where Bruce Springsteen and Dolly Parton are mentioned in the same breath, but according to 60 Minutes and Vanity Fair, they did a poll question, and they basically said, if we were going to rewrite the national anthem, have a new national anthem, who would you like to have do it? And number one answer is Bruce Springsteen, 22%, Dolly Parton. Right behind that. Dolly Parton, come on. Stevie Wonder, a close third at 18%. Bob Dylan at 11%. John Williams at 10%, Jay-Z at 8%, and Madonna at 5%. Some things I just don't understand anymore. I'll be the first to admit it. All right, the Miss USA pageant. Donald Trump in hot water again. He's got a contestant saying the whole thing was rigged, and she saw the list of finalists a couple of days before the pageant even took place. And it's funny how the list of finalists look exactly like that list. But anyhow, they grabbed 11 of the Miss USA pageant contestants. They grabbed 11 of them, and they said, who's the vice president of the United States? 6 of them did not know the answer. That sounds about right. Remember these words: South County Walmart Mobile Meth Lab. You know, you talk about reinforcing a cultural stereotype, and there it is. A woman in South County is cooking meth right there in a jar in her purse, and right there in a Walmart. Again, sounds about right. The Dome Project, your St. Louis Rams. And I know some of you are going, not my St. Louis Rams. So this is our money, right? Isn't this our money that built the old place and upgraded the current place? and they're talking about using even more taxpayer-supported funds to build a new place or tear the insides out of this one. They just put all this granite and all these upgrades, something like $20 million worth of stuff into this place, and they want to tear it all out because Stan Kroenke just has to have a place that looks like Jerry Jones' fabulous place. And the media's got to fight tooth and nail. They actually have to sue the CBC here in St. Louis to get information about what's going on in terms of the negotiations. This is our money. But again, this is how St. Louis works, or doesn't work, as the case may be. Bob Welch, spinal surgery 3 months ago. You know, George Clooney, in an interview not too long ago, said that he was contemplating suicide. And I know a little something about this because when you come out of back surgery, and I've had 2 back surgeries, cervical things, you got to wear those big plastic Jerry's Kids neck braces for 6 months. You are thinking to yourself, this can't be, this is awful, and you start thinking to yourself, am I ever going to be able to turn my head again? If I'm driving, am I going to be able to look into a lane change? And you get very, very depressed, and you start having really odd thoughts. It happened to George Clooney and Bob Welch from Fleetwood Mac. Spinal surgery 3 months ago. Doctors told him it wasn't going to get any better, and he said he didn't want his wife to have to care for an invalid, and so kaboom, bang, that's it, end of show. Bob Welch checks out. I will tell you this, the original version of Sentimental Lady, not the remix that he did after he left the band, is the better version. And if you don't have a copy of Bare Trees in your music collection, in your CD collection, you have a gaping hole in your musical collection. You just apparently don't know about it yet. All right, we're moving in a couple of weeks. And one of the things I always do before I move is I try to consolidate, throw things out, you know, pare away the stuff that I don't need. And the other thing that I do is with the improving of technology, you try to take these big honking, you know, 3/4-inch broadcast tapes that are twice the size of a standard VCR, and you try to transfer those things onto a more tight format. In this case, I have a DVD burner, so I can burn these things, get rid of these big honking cassette things, and then you got a little thin little wafer. And so I've been doing that. I went back and I found some old stuff, including St. Louis Night at David Letterman. This was back in the late 1990s. 461 people invited from St. Louis to fill the entire Ed Sullivan Theater in New York. We gave away a lot of those tickets. I think we gave away about 100 of the 461. We had contests on the air, and I was there that night, and we were pumping up that crowd. And, you know, they fly you in to LaGuardia, and you land, and they take you by bus to the hotel, and they wine you and they dine you. They had a party for us. Larry Bud Melman was there. Sarah Joel and Mujibur were there, and a couple of Rupert G was there. And then they closed off, I think it was 54th Street, walked about 4 blocks from the New York Hilton over to the Ed Sullivan Theater. NYPD closes the place down. I'm out there shooting TV pieces. I'm in the lobby. We're pumping up the crowd, and then the show starts, and the place went absolutely berserk. And I'll tell you a little something that a lot of people don't know. Eddie Brill, who for years, and I mean something like 14 years, was the warm-up act and the talent coordinator for The Late Show with David Letterman. Stand-up comedian, very funny guy, and he was the guy who would be, if you went to see a taping of Letterman, he would be the guy who would come out at the beginning of the show, before the show started, and just sort of entertain people, explain the rules of the house, tell people not to whistle because it makes the audio guy go crazy, you know, just explain what's going to be happening, and then he introduces David Letterman. Dave makes a couple of jokes and then disappears behind. Paul starts with the band. David Letterman walks out, show starts, and it's great. And Eddie Brill will tell you to this day that the gold standard in terms of audience response for the history of that show, The Late Show with David Letterman, was the St. Louis audience. Eddie Brill told me that Dave would sometimes say, "What sort of a house is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's a great house. It's not St. Louis, but it's a good house." That is how wild and out of control that crowd was. Roseanne was there. Chuck Berry was there. Roseanne came in on the Clydesdales. It was great. She talked about her first comedy tour back in the late 1980s where she played the Westport Playhouse. I emceed that show, by the way. And there was even a television spot that ran during that show for KSD, where I was working at the time. And they were showing all this flashing stuff. They put stuff all over the screen, and they said, "And mornings with J.C. Corcoran." And they showed a very just quick flash, almost a subliminal flash of a picture of Brad Pitt. That's how funny that night was, but it was just great to see that again. And I also found my television special from 1989, which was called JC Went to Cardinal Spring Training and All We Got Was This Lousy TV Show. And it was blasted by the media who saw it going, that show's not about baseball. And whoever told you it was going to be about baseball? It was about the spring training experience. So I sort of had the last laugh on that when the show won an Emmy. It won an Emmy. I have it on the mantle inside the house. So I've been finding all this cool stuff, and it's just really, really fun to look at. And speaking of sort of flashbacks and throwbacks and history, coming up a week from today, I'm cutting this on Monday, June 11th. So 1 week from today is the 10th anniversary of the passing of Jack Buck. June 18th, 2002. He was 77 years old, and it was only 4 days later, June 22nd, 2002, that Darryl Kile would pass away in the team hotel in Chicago at the age of 33. Darryl Kile's dad died at 44 of a stroke, so he had that terrible gene that sort of runs in that family. But you'll be seeing a lot of Jack Buck tributes and things like that. And I may even have a little something to do with one or two of those, but I'm going to hold back on that until I can tell you whether they're going to reuse something that I sent to Mike Bush 10 years ago when Jack Buck died. All right, what do we got here? For those of you too young to remember, and some of you are old enough to remember, but the years and years of drug abuse has destroyed your ability to recall. This is a little throwback to the last time that we were on our way to losing a pro football team. The battle was between the mayor, Vince Schamel, who wanted to build a dome stadium in the city, and County Executive Gene McNary, who wanted to build a stadium out in Maryland Heights on a floodplain. The two kept arguing. In the meantime, Bill Bidwell got tired of waiting, and he hightailed it off to Phoenix, Arizona. So every year they do this thing called the Gridiron Dinner. And it's this closed down by invitation only, fat cats in the media, fat cats in sports, big businessmen, politicians, and stuff like that. And McNary performed a song parody about the entire ordeal of the St. Louis football Cardinals leaving St. Louis, and that was never intended to leave that banquet hall, that song, but I got a copy of it and then set it to my own video when I was working at Channel 5, and here we are 25 years later facing the same problem. But here was that video from Channel 5 News with Gene McNary. We made his lips move, and we animated the whole thing. It was really, really cool. Please take a look at it. I worked really hard on it back 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, listen to me, this is the late 80s, for God's sakes, 10 years ago. And we put it on JC's Eye Candy. It's right below what you're looking at right now. Okay, again, Paul McCartney, should he hang it up? Or do you just sort of like the idea that Paul's still around? Please answer our rock and roll poll question. We'll have results for you on Friday. In the meantime, that's it. We are trying to update every Monday and Friday, and so that's it for the Daily Dose for Monday, June 11th, 2012, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Clayton. And in the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later. Bye.